Hi everybody, the religious freak Earthling Ed is out on the streets again proving how ignorant he is.
I'm here at Harvard University today and I'm going to be asking Harvard students questions about equality and moral consideration and seeing what they think about
You're
whether
so
or not
freaking
we should include
pale,
non-human
man.
animals into our circle of moral consideration as well.
Sick
The
guy.
first question that I'm asking people is, do you think that all humans should be granted kind of that same moral consideration?
So yeah, I think certainly everybody deserves some sort of equality.
Should we kind of consider all humans within our moral consideration and kind of grant a kind of a blanket equality to everyone to have the right to life?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what is it about that?
That's all he
humans
talks
that
about,
gives us
religion.
What attributes do humans possess that mean that we should be granted a right to life?
Wow. Okay, that's a tough one.
I do think all humans should have a equal right to life and liberty.
So I mean, I'm a vegetarian, and so I personally feel like a connection with animals and whatnot. But I think it's tough because then when we choose life forms in general, like why do we draw the line in animals? And like we can think about the number of bacteria that our gut is killing every day, and like that's like I mean it seems like at some point we do end up drawing a line somewhere, and so I guess I'm not, even though I personally would have like a very tough time like killing an animal or thinking about harming animals, I'm not sure that I would be comfortable imposing that on others who have decided that the line lies closer to humanity than myself.
It's an interesting one. I guess the difference in bacteria would be like the sentience and consciousness, whereas I think for me the moral consideration of non-human animals is that our moral code dictates that humans should be granted consideration because we're conscious, sentient, have individualistic experiences of life, but then the animals that we exploit also.
Basically, just so you understand what's going on here, religions created morals. It's the rules that we are supposed to live by. We are supposed to treat human beings in a specific way. And because we are also animals, it should apply to all of the animals. Of course, vegans ignore that plant agriculture kills way more animals than any slaughterhouse out there. They don't care about that. They only care about the slaughterhouse footage shown in the documentaries that brainwash them. Most of which is faked. This has been proven. They actually pay the workers to torture the animals. Who pays them? The companies, organizations behind veganism. Yes, that's really how twisted it is. It's messed up. Anyway, this is what they do to appeal to weak and emotional slaves. It's mentally ill people who fall for it. Religions are anti-nature. All of the morals are satanic. That's just how it is. We are obligate carnivores, and these man-made rules will only make human beings unhealthy. And this is what he doesn't talk about.
Have those same traits.
Fair enough, but I think sometimes, like for instance, we will suggest that animals, obviously animals have emotions and feelings, but like we are not able to experience those in the same way that we are able to maybe empathize with humanity. Right. So I think it makes it difficult when we're like talking about a starfish, for instance, like where's sentience there? Like I think it just. The issue becomes a little bit more complicated. And
it's sort of a good point.
Feel like,
that's a reason why we keep cats and dogs as pets. We can only relate to carnivores.
That we don't with other species.
Very few people have
we feel
pets,
solidarity with our family
such
more
as
than we feel
rabbits.
with the rest of humanity.
And they find them boring.
Lines that we draw arbitrarily, but maybe
I guess that's the point, isn't it? It's like an arbitrary distinction between, and it makes sense for us to have closer alliances with our own species because it's easy, as you say, to empathize. But do you think that kind of lack of ability to empathize somewhat demotes the value of an animal's life or a non-human animal's life, or should they still be granted that right to life?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think that I think it does. I think it makes it. I think maybe the project should be recognizing that it is arbitrary and making sure that we are okay with the decisions that we are making, the lines in the dirt that we're drawing. If they don't have any like specific moral backing, then we just have to be maybe aware of those and very conscious.
Okay, so if we branch the question out further and we say,
all that he's talking about is living by man-made rules. It's very messed up. That is enslavement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He wants humanity to be enslaved. This is what he's promoting.
Well, in the case of animals, it's very clear that animals have, they have desires.
Put the
they
dead
have,
kit on your
preferences,
microphone next
they take
time.
pleasure in certain things. They socialize.
Animal abuse and those kind of things, I think that's like absolutely an exploitation and just a degradation of animals' dignity.
I guess their autonomy as well, right?
Their autonomy as well, I guess, in some ways, yeah.
What would be animal abuse? What would be like an example of that? Or what does the word abuse, how do you define that word?
Of course, we all know what Bunny is getting to.
Depriving them of the things that they need to survive,
Right.
that type of thing, yeah.
What about like the opposite of that? What about, say, when we take their life from them? Is that a form of abuse?
I think in some instances, yes. I don't think in all instances, but I do think in some instances it definitely can be abusive, yeah.
Could you define like an instance where it wouldn't be an abuse to take the life of an animal?
I mean, I think different people obviously like fall on different places of the spectrum morally, right? I think there are circumstances in which like animals are, especially if you think of, like, are we considering fish animals?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think people could imagine circumstances in which fish are allowed to kind of free range, wild fish, and are caught and people eat them.
Sure.
And I think I wouldn't consider that abuse, and I think there's a valid argument that that's not abusive.
What would that argument be, do you think? What would be we use the word moral. What would be the
Right.
moral justification to consume animals?
They could live lives free of like torture and free of abuse, and at the same time humans could consume them.
Right. So if we had like a big lush green pasture with cows like grazing, we would then be morally justified to take them to a slaughterhouse. Is that the general thinking?
I don't know. So I don't
That's
know.
kinda, yeah. And then so the next question, I kind of expand it a little bit further. And
There's no way to win an argument, because if you follow religion, which 99% of people do, and yes, most of them call themselves atheists, they're super religious, you're never gonna get anywhere with that. Morals were created to enslave us. That's why we learned them as kids already. There's a right and wrong, good and bad, blah blah blah. Has anybody ever heard of that in nature? No, of course not, because it's man-made ideas. In nature, you do what you want, you follow your instinct. When you believe in a right and wrong, which has been man-made, then you don't follow your instinct anymore. And this is what he's talking about. He's an absolute slave. He's been brainwashed, big time. And most of the people he talks to, whether they call themselves atheists or Christians, all still follow the same religious beliefs as him. So they cannot even win an argument with him, because they already have the same beliefs. Only natural people can see through this. It's just ridiculous.
well, what about, say, non-human animals? Do they deserve a sense of moral consideration as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of people think that there's kind of a correlation between intelligence and the possession of a soul, and they kind of link their answer with that. I don't know that I believe that.
Maybe there are alternatives in which those distinctions don't exist, but I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a very tough question.
There are no
Could you maybe
alternatives.
expand on what alternatives that would be?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could envision a world, or at least the way that I choose to sort of envision relationships between humanity and animals is that we try our hardest to stay out of their way, and respect their autonomy, but I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how feasible it is. I mean, I've not done so much research in this, but I don't even know how feasible it is in the context of domesticated animals at this point. So, like,
Certainly.
if we just let them, if we stopped, mass producing them or whatever, certainly like living in the wild is not really an option for them
Not
anymore,
for them,
right?
no,
So,
no.
and then I don't know. So I think it makes it difficult to especially the concept of evaluation. Like, how do we evaluate an?
Here's the problem with these two. He's a vegetarian, which means that he eats eggs and dairy, I suppose. Either way, he's getting a lot of the animal nutrients, which Ed, the anemic guy, is not getting. He's severely sick. I also put him in epitome too. The vegetarian doesn't understand that once the milk products would be gone, that he would be just as malnourished as Ed. complete disconnection from nature.
Animal's life as a human, as useful for, as a object for humans, and then how do we evaluate an animal's life and what that means, like, if it's not, and
I guess to kind of understand whether an animal should be granted moral consideration is to work out whether they should be considered as an individual or as property. In the eyes of the law, they're considered as property, which creates a system where we can exploit them kind of rather freely.
I think humans have some level of dominion over animals, and I think that there is a way that exists that you can do that rightly, and you can do that without being abusive and exploitative.
But do you think? Okay, so let's say in a slaughterhouse. Okay.
Okay.
What happens to an animal in a slaughterhouse?
They're killed, I assume. I don't know.
They're killed. Yeah, I mean, that's
yeah.
right. But I guess, like, how are they killed? You're not like. Do you have any ideas of the methods?
I imagine it's a pretty bloody and kind of yeah.
By nature, I guess it is. Right?
Yeah.
So if they, let's say, cut their throats, right, in a slaughterhouse, when I say the word, like the phrase "we cut an animal's throat," do you think that, objectively speaking, that would be seen as a violent act?
I do think that's violent. Yeah.
Right. But then at the same time, how do we take the life of an animal from them in a way that is?
Perfect example. He admits to being a Satanist. He said that by nature it's bloody, meaning that he is against nature. Just to clarify, in case there's anybody who follows Earthling Ed and believes that he is about nature, it should be clear, but to some people it's not, especially the ethical vegans, because they're all about morals, and whether they are officially part of a religion or not, obviously all of them are if they are part of veganism. It is a religion by every definition of the word, but even if it's some other which they consider an actual religion. Here he is, admitting that he's against nature.
Isn't violent.
I guess there are levels to the violence, right?
Levels to violence.
Yeah. I think that probably right when you think of maybe not hunting for sport, but I think in some, like, for instance, in some,
by the way, the reason blood flows out of the animal
like hunting as
is to nourish and hydrate us.
Is something that has been
It's
historically
the best
done, and I
liquid
don't think it's been. I think
food
when
you could possibly
it's
drink.
done rightly, I think there's a respect for animals and for what they provide that allows you to do that without just.
Of course, to a Satanist, that's cruel, because they don't care about human health.
But I think
we don't have that indigenous culture.
And a lot of them are actually anti-human.
Sure.
And so how do we then, when we have an
So
abundance
for them, of
options,
course,
how do we
veganism is
just
perfect,
paying
because
someone to cut the throat of an
they
animal in
can
that
watch
circumstance?
everybody get sick and die.
No, I mean I do think
And they
that
hate
that's
themselves,
definitely
of course.
something to take into consideration, right?
Veganism stems from self-hate.
What does the word humane mean? Do you say like humane hunting or humane slaughter?
Yeah.
But we have to define what that word means
What
to
that
use it.
word means.
If I was to treat you humanely, what would I would be treating you in what manner?
I guess probably in the literal way, it's probably like as is rightful to treat another human. But I guess
That's where it derives from, the word human.
Sure.
But I guess synonyms would.
It doesn't whatsoever. Humane derives from how humans are by nature, not by how the religions define us. Of course, that's the way most people see it nowadays, and this is why it's so manipulative, because if you believe that humane means to care about somebody, to treat them nice and so on, you get what it means, then you automatically believe that that's how humans should be, and you can easily confuse people with the word and manipulate them to get them to accept these kind of points. Humane just means the way human beings are, which means everything. So, for example, killing an animal is the most humane thing you could possibly do because it's our nature. So if you want to torture them to adrenalize the blood before, then that's up to you. That's humane because that's what humans do in nature. Or if you want to kill them quickly, then that's also humane. It's up to you. But not killing them and doing what he's talking about, that's inhumane. It's very twisted, and I don't expect any vegans to understand this, but when you live in a religious world, as most of us do nowadays, then you just don't understand this. Humane does not mean being kind and all of that bullshit. Humane also means being angry, killing, and so on. Those are all humane things that humans do. An inhumane way to treat an animal would be, for example, if you find a lamb hurt quite badly on the sidewalk and you bring it to a vet, which doesn't exist in nature, to heal it. That would be satanic, because humans would always eat it in nature, with no exceptions.
It'd be like compassion, benevolence.
Right.
Do you think there's a compassionate or benevolent way to take the life of an animal if we don't have to?
He says we don't have to. That's of course wrong. There's over
like
50 nutrients that you
like,
can't get from plants.
There should
So
absolutely
we
be a level of
have
compassion.
to be healthy.
Like you said,
If you want to be unhealthy and die early like vegans,
I guess it's a matter of personal
yeah,
opinion.
but
Like,
that's
I
anti-nature.
that there are
That's where they get the
ways that
consequences.
When purchasing products or like meat or things like that, if we were constantly reminded of the process, that it probably, you would see a reduction in people buying those products.
That's
yeah.
a really valid point. Do you think that morally
Because
there's a
most people
difference
are
between
pussies.
purchasing? So there's a documentary called Dominion, which is, it ties in nicely to what we were chatting about, actually.
Yeah.
There's also another documentary called Land of Hope and Glory, which is about,
Land of Hope and Glory.
Land. Which
Almost all of the
sorry,
footage is
my
fake.
English accent, which is a UK documentary.
Okay.
It wouldn't even matter
But
if
at the
it
same time
wasn't,
explores,
and you would have to simply
traditional farming
buy
practices. So those
from
two I'd recommend.
Okay,
I mean, if you want to,
different places, and you should support local farms anyway.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
So all of this is completely irrelevant anyway.
Canada Goose has
These
a
people are not
tradition that's almost
fighting
infamous
for the
like, fair trim and
change
stuff.
of
So
how
I was wondering,
animals are
when you bought
treated.
it, were you aware of it
They're
being, like, a real
using
slave trade?
this
Do you think that
to tell
behavioural
people not
traits
to eat meat
that
at
our
all.
ancestors
Doesn't
should set
even
a
make
moral precedent
sense.
for?
Alright, so there you go. He completely ignores that you can't get over 50 nutrients from plants because, as you could see, he doesn't care about nature. Most likely he hates nature, because most people who hate themselves also hate nature. They really don't like it. They don't like the world they live in, and they want to change it. And they somehow magically, because they grew up in a city, don't understand that you can't escape nature. It will always catch up. If you would leave the city alone, it would be full of plants and animals after a while, taking over, because all that we do in everyday life is cut down the grass, trim the trees, and so on, so it doesn't take over, but that's only because of human interactions. Ed believes that human beings are not part of nature and that we can eat whatever we feel like, even though every animal only has one natural diet, which they have to eat to be healthy. There will never be a way around it. He's a modern-day Satanist, and by Satanism I mean religions that are anti-nature. All of them are, but veganism is of course the top one. Thanks for watching, guys.